Hey guys, welcome back. So now if you ever wondered what happens to a Loki when he's eaten by a Laufey, and I mean if you've ever wondered about it, you ain't gotta wonder about it no more, because that's what we finna get into in this one. And on top of that, also learn a bit more of the history of the War of Realms and Malekith as well. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so you can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so pretty much going back to the beginning, or at least back to the first issue of War of the Realms, when Malekith started his invasion on Earth, accompanied by his Dark Council, which in turn caused every single hero that was around to come out the woodwork. Like, it really went from 0 to 100 real quick. And so now when it came to a point that Laufey had grabbed Freya, and presumably he was going to kill her, Loki then cut off Laufey's hand, saving Freya, but immediately after, he waited around for the consequence, which was him being eaten. And at the time when he did this, his final message was to bring back Thor. Like, he was like, Thor's trapped in Jotunheim. I'm not sure if he's alive at this time, but he was like, you guys need him because he's your only chance of winning this war. And then immediately, like right after that, he was eaten by Laufey, which on one hand sends a message to the other heroes as far as the urgency of Loki's last words, but also jumping over to Jason Aaron's Thor, we get a continuation that picks up with Loki immediately after. But it's here when we find Loki, he doesn't know exactly where he's at. It's like a bit of a limbo as far as the tone of this place, but in addition to that, he notices he's in a much older time. And when he arrives here, just looking around at all the death in this battlefield, I hope I didn't do this, and immediately after he hears a voice approaching saying, you didn't do it, I did. And lo and behold, the voice speaking to him was Viking Loki. And so now I want you guys to keep a couple things in mind, because one, you have like your Ragnarok instance to where the Asgardians die and they're born again, which we talked about quite a few times on this channel. But in the case of Loki, this is a little bit different, and mainly because he had his name removed from the Book of Death, which would allow him not to repeat the cycle of Ragnarok. But as the cycle of Ragnarok continues and everything is reborn, you then get other Lokis. So long story short, Loki pretty much glitched death. Loki's like, I got a death glitch, you can't do it now, they patched it. But ever since Loki's done this, like back in Journey into Mystery, there's been like this weird separation between him, Death, and the other versions of himself. And so when we see this Viking Loki show up, we're not sure exactly what's going on just yet, but we do know that he's here to send a message. And so now a little while back, I did a video about this Viking Loki. I think it was like Valentines Day or something like that. And I know it's pretty ironic for the message of what exactly happened in that video. And I got a link down below for anybody who's missed it, but be sure to check that out because that story was a bit more significant than most might have thought. So if you haven't seen it, pause the video, go check it out, and head back over here. Alright, but those of you who remember, though on the surface it seemed like a story of Loki just doing different schemes to trick Thor, like same old Loki, but as it turns out that even way back then with this Viking Loki agitating this war between the dark elves and between the dwarves, that by sparking this war that he initially only meant to be a distraction, but as we come to find out when we trace that all the way to present day, the truth is that with doing this, Loki actually started the War of Realms. And it's crazy the way that Jason Aaron has been setting this up, because even to jump back even further, still in the Viking era, but further as for us within series, but this narrative has not just gone back through Thor, but it's gone back through God of Thunder, it's gone back through the mighty Thor, and it's like now here we are within the War of Realms, getting pieces of that bigger picture to where this new detail's a pretty big one. Because this means not only did Loki begin the War of Realms, but it also means that Loki inadvertently created Malekith as far as the conditions he was born in, being born into war, the way that he was raised, and even more so his mother cursing him so he wouldn't be suitable to be a soldier because she didn't want him to die in the field. And what's crazy, like just to take it a little bit further and going into Malekith's origin, like because his mother had made it so he could not train to be a warrior, they still had to make use of him. And since he couldn't fight, they just made him a corpse burner. But it was during this time that one of the bodies he was pulling, which was still alive, to where in his line of work, they're like, okay, if they can't fight, then they dead, so just wheel them off. And that's pretty much the judgment call that Malekith would have to make every time. But after making hundreds and hundreds of trips and hauling off thousands of dark elves, there came a point in time when there was a dark elf who he was hauling who was still alive, and Malekith was hauling off to be burnt to where the two of them were captured by some trolls. And as it turned out, he was a wizard, and I want to say his name was Eldred, not 100% on the name, but as it turned out, this wizard ended up using Malekith's help in order to do a quote magic trick and get the both of them out of there, because he wasn't presumably strong enough to do it on his own. So in a way, at this point in time, Malekith needed him and he needed Malekith. And as many of you know, that ended with Malekith betraying the wizard because he disagreed with the wizard on wanting to bring the war to an end, to where in return the wizard then marked Malekith's face. But for Malekith, this was a defining moment because he was born into war. He lost 12 brothers to war. He had burned over 3,000 corpses, some of which who weren't finished dying yet, much like how he met the wizard, just that plenty of those guys he followed through with. But it was after this confrontation to not only was Malekith marked, but it's also when he realized that he didn't know what he would be without war. And it's like now we discovered that Loki is to thank for that, because war shaped everything that Malekith is. And that's really the thing that past Loki is trying to get this Loki to see. And it's almost like past Loki's a bit more prouder of it than this Loki, because the current Loki, he has a bit more wisdom, and prior to him being eaten, he'd rather change many of his past decisions, especially now being aware that he is the reason that the War of Realms has come about. And for this Loki, who really feels like this version of hell, or rather this is his own version of hell, to where it's like he's died and he has to spend time with himself. And I can name a few people who that would be totally hell for, but this video ain't about that. But when this Loki asked past Loki, like, what's going on? What did you do to me? And past Loki's like, no, that part, that's on you, because you killed us when you jumped in Laufey's mouth pretty much. But it's after this where Loki finds himself taken to about 3 weeks prior to the date of his death in what appears to be Jotunheim before his father Laufey, and it's like he's almost watching the day play out as it did, except while he's here, he's met by Kid Loki. And so now with Kid Loki meeting here with Loki proper, and I just call him Loki proper for this point in narrative, because that's going to be contested pretty soon. But when he's met here by Kid Loki, who tells him that Kid Loki is representing of the present, it was at this point where I was like, okay, we're getting the Ghost of Christmas Past, Present, and Future thing going on. And I already have a pretty decent idea who the one of the future is going to be at this point. At least those are my thoughts my first time reading this through. But the main point that Kid Loki drives here to Loki proper is that not only is he representative of the present, but he's also a representation of what Loki should be at this current time. And even though Loki scoffs the rebuttal that he did not want to be the villain, and Kid Loki cuts him off like, of course you didn't. And that's why he stabbed Freya in the back with a poison dagger, which actually did happen back in Jason Aaron's 2015-2016 Mighty Thor, and at the time with Freya using Loki as a spy to spy on Malekith. And this was originally planned for him to work on the inside, join the Dark Council, and report back to Freya. But in order to get rid of any suspicion from Malekith, Loki had to do the unthinkable, or at least make it appear that he did. And we later come to find out that the poison on this dagger, it would only be enough to make Freya seem sick until the point of death, like on the brink of death, which at the time for Loki is all that he really needed. And of course the getting stabbed part was a part of Freya's plan, and that was definitely Loki turning it up a few notches. But what this did for a while is it made Loki seem like he was committed to the council and willing to do what needed to be done. But through the course of time, you kind of got this glimmer of who Loki was, because at one point in time when Laufey wanted Loki to kill this frog, and this had actually taken place not long ago in the same place that Kid Loki and Loki proper are standing. Now I mean like weeks before Loki's death. But with Laufey demanding Loki to kill this frog and he didn't, at the point in time Laufey had told Loki that he didn't have it in him, and Laufey just stepped on the frog like it was disgusting. But from here Loki is then taken into the future, and so now I'm talking about countless eons into the future. And if you have been rocking with me for a minute, you know exactly which Loki we're looking at. And yes, that is Necro Sword Loki, the Planet Butcher, the Ego Butcher, Butcher of Worlds. And Loki actually arrives at the point in future history, if that's a thing. I mean, it's a future event that we talked about before, so we're here talking about it again, so it's future history. But when Loki arrives here, he also arrives just after this Loki, the World Butcher, has just killed Ego and taken the Necro Sword. And so the message from this Loki is pretty straightforward. He just tells him that, look, I am the prime Loki. You're nothing but a diminished reflection, and I, here with the Necro Sword, I am the best Loki that there will ever be. You are not the Omega, you are not the ultimate Loki, I am. Which are pretty heavy words, especially with keeping in consideration some of the things that have been working in the background, which have been orchestrated by another version of Loki, which could very possibly have been Loki the World Butcher. But from here, kind of snapping out of it and coming back to grips with himself and really trying to make his way back to some kind of normal location, somewhere where he can regroup. And from here, where Loki concentrates, he actually makes his way back to your present day. But with making his way back to your present day, he actually finds himself undying still in the belly of Luffy, like being digested as we speak, like this whole entire time. Like, man, if that ain't another Tales from the Hood type ending, I don't know what is. Like, that is insane. Like, could you imagine? Like, just in the belly. And I'm sure it ain't no lights in there for real. Like, you wouldn't be able to see around in there. But man, could you imagine what it smell like? Goodness. All right, let me not get into that. But either way, that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll do it again in the next one. All right, later.